This week in Jamaica Now, attorneys lose fight to be excluded from anti-money laundering reporting regime. Most wanted Bigga Crime cut down in Clarendon.
I think it's a victory for the people of those communities.
A JLP activist is killed in Portmore, St. Catherine. And devastation, more than 20,000 killed in a catastrophic Turkey-Syria earthquake. I'm Jovan Johnson and this is Jamaica Now. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark has signalled that the government would be moving quickly to have lawyers comply with the Proceeds of Crime Act to report questionable transactions. This follows the government's major victory at the Privy Council in its fight against money laundering. Jamaica's final appellate court ruled that the section of the law which places a duty on attorneys to report suspicious activities in relation to their clients is not unconstitutional. Lawyers will face sanctions if they fail to report suspicious transactions. The Jamaican Bar Association had taken the issue to the Supreme Court, which ruled that the act was lawful. But the Court of Appeal overturned that decision. The Attorney General and the General Legal Counsel took the issue to the Privy Council, which restored the ruling of the Supreme Court. Dr. Clark called the ruling a game-changer in the war against money laundering. He said Jamaica now satisfies the international standard of bringing all designated non-financial businesses and professionals under its anti-money laundering combating the financing of terrorism regime. Dr. Clark said Jamaica will now move with expedition to ensure that attorneys fulfill their obligations under the law. Crucial evidence that was led by a ballistics expert linking 11 guns that are reportedly a part of the Clansman one-don gang's arsenal to several murders may not be allowed. Chief Justice Brian Sykes said on Thursday that there were chain of custody issues with the evidence such as spent casings, guns, bullet fragments and bullets that were used to arrive at the findings. A ballistics expert had given evidence that 11 firearms were linked to 10 murders reportedly orchestrated by the gang. He had also disclosed that the so-called system guns were directly linked to 35 shooting incidents, which include at least 27 other murders, and linked to 16 other firearms. The expert arrived at his findings after analyzing the evidence, such as bullets and spent shell casings that were reportedly recovered from each murder scene. However, Justice Sykes hinted that the connection may have missed the mark and that the evidence may not be accepted. Head of the Clarendon Police, Superintendent Carlos Russell, has urged residents of Longville Park to be on the lookout for migrant criminals. Mr. Russell made the call after Wednesday's killing of Nesta Bigga Crime Morrison, one of Jamaica's most wanted criminals, by the security forces in Longville Park in the parish. It's reported that Mr. Morrison, who was wanted for a double murder, a shooting and an arson, had been occupying a rented property in the community. It was a case of déjà vu for the southeastern Clarendon community, which was home to another of the country's most wanted men, Rudolph Boxer Shaw, who was killed last year. Now, Deputy Commissioner of Police Fitz Bailey said Mr. Morrison's demise is a relief for communities where he reigned terror.
Bigga Crime has been on the police most wanted list for over 2 years, and despite many requests from the police for him to turn himself in, he actually did not. And several operations were mounted against him that were unsuccessful. Bigga Crime rained terror on the citizens within the 11-mile Bull Bay areas and its environment, killing and maiming several people. I think it's a victory for the people of those communities, and it's a great relief that he can no longer perpetrate those acts of violence against them.
52-year-old shopkeeper Diana Griffiths became the latest victim slain in the wave of violence gripping the Gulf area of Gregory Park in St. Catherine on Tuesday. Miss Griffiths is a former Jamaica Labour Party activist. Her small grocery store was firebombed in the lead-up to the 2020 general elections. Miss Griffiths was seated in front of her shop when she was attacked by one of 3 men who approached her. A relative who was in the vicinity reportedly rushed to the woman's assistance. But shortly afterwards, the men returned to the scene, firing wildly, causing persons to scamper for cover. No one else was injured. Meanwhile, Commissioner of Police Major General Anthony Anderson has reported that for the month of January, major crimes declined by 31% when compared to the same month in 2022. And murders, the yardstick by which Jamaicans judge crime in the country, were down by 34%. The government has scrapped the requirement for children to be restrained in special seats in public passenger vehicles. It was one of several concessions from the Holness administration, which is reeling from the backlash since the February 1 implementation of the Road Traffic Act and regulations. There will also be a 3-month window for additional amendments to the Act. Taxi drivers railed against the provisions, refusing in some cases to transport children for fear of being ticketed. Following days of discontent, including a patchy withdrawal of cab service in several parishes, Transport Minister Audley Shaw outlined the concessions in a parliamentary statement on Tuesday. He sought to remind the public that the child seat provision had always been a requirement but was not previously enforced. But he said the government has listened to the complaints.
The realities of our public passenger transportation system and how it operates will place an undue burden on parents whose children need to travel in public transportation, whether accompanied by an adult or not. The risk of the inability to access transportation services may exceed the risk associated with travel without using a child restraint system. And in this regard, the rules applicable to public transport vehicles will have to be less stringent than those for private vehicles.
Emergency crews made a series of dramatic rescues in Turkey on Friday, pulling several people, some almost unscathed, from the rubble 4 days after a catastrophic earthquake killed more than 20,000 people. The 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit the border region between Turkey and Syria, an area home to more than 13.5 million people, early on Monday. With morgues and cemeteries overwhelmed, bodies lay wrapped in blankets, rugs and tarps in the streets of some cities. Temperatures remain below freezing across the large region, and many people have no place to shelter. The government has distributed millions of hot meals as well as tents and blankets, but was still struggling to reach many people in need. On Tuesday, Jamaica's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Kamina Johnson-Smith, said no Jamaican had been affected by the devastating earthquake. Mrs. Johnson-Smith said this was based on reports from Jamaica's mission in Geneva and the Honorary Consul in Turkey. She expressed deep sadness at the significant loss of life and property destruction from Monday's earthquake. Prime Minister Andrew Holness and the opposition People's National Party have expressed regret over Thursday's passing of former party member and Senator Delano Franklin. The PNP says Mr. Franklin was an accomplished lawyer and a faithful comrade. He was appointed to the Senate in 2002, where he served as Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. He also served as a special advisor to former Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller and chief advisor to former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson. Prime Minister Holness says Mr. Franklin's legacy will live on through the countless lives he touched. And the religious community was plunged into mourning on Friday with news of the death of retired Anglican Bishop of Kingston, Robert Thompson. He died from cancer. Bishop Thompson retired in 2020 after more than 47 years of service to the church community. He was elected bishop in 2005 after almost 2 decades as a rector of St. Andrew Parish Church. Prime Minister Andrew Holness said Bishop Robertson gave freely his counsel and served the church with passion and humility. And the opposition PNP hailed Bishop Thompson as a great leader of the modern church and a theological scholar who served the Anglican community with great distinction. And that's it for this edition of Jamaica Now, your weekly review of the big news stories. Send us your comments at onlinefeedback@gleanerjm.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Jamaica Gleaner and on Facebook at Gleaner Jamaica. Like this video on our YouTube page, turn on the notification and subscribe today. I'm Jovan Johnson, and before we go, we bring you interviews with the Carteret College student Tavion Morgan, who won the Gleaner's Children's Zone Spelling Bee Championship 2023, and 11-year-old head girl of Jesse Ripple Primary School, Courtney Greaves, who created history as the youngest awardee in the Global Poetry Foundation competition.
This is my 5th competition. It's been 5.5 years I've been preparing. Finally, the hard work has paid off. My 2nd time at nationals. I'm just overly elated about this. It's like it's not real, because of how long I've been doing it, but my hard work has finally paid off.
How do you feel today? I am overwhelmed with joy to see that my child, who was 7, came to this very stage, lost and cried that he will go through the entire dictionary and return as a winner, and he has returned as that winner. So I am overwhelmed with joy that he has set his mind to a dream and he has fulfilled it. My Tavian.
Coach, how are you feeling today about his victory?
Wow, I am lost for words. I'm really elated. I feel proud for happy for Tavian. He has worked diligently. He knows what it means to put in hard work. He wasn't afraid of hard work, so I'm really happy for him. Really proud of him.
How do you feel to be the winner of the Global Poetry Foundation competition for 2023?
I feel elated to know that I am representing my country, Jamaica, as the youngest finalist and winner of this beautiful competition. I first heard about this competition about one year ago in 2022 when one of my mentors introduced it to me. My mentor inspired me to enter because I love poetry, and she also said that I have a beautiful voice and wonderful poetry to enter into this competition.
Okay, how many poems did you enter?
I entered one in every category, so that is about 15 poems.
So you had 15 poems on hold already to enter. So how do you feel about your achievement now?
I don't have words to say. I don't have words to say. I am proud of her, and I pray for God to continue to bless her and cover her.
At one point in her life, did you realize that she has this great talent?
When she was going to St. Joseph Infant School, and I think we're going home, and we were at the Water Theatre passing because we were walking, and gentleman said something, and she said, "We must have service," and then she started repeating it, and then when I went back to school next day, I was saying it to the teacher, and she said, "And you didn't know that Courtney can do poem?" And I said, "But I just discovered it yesterday," and then from there on, the teacher decided to let you enter JCDC,